All right, here's the scenario. You're trying to pick the best home security camera to protect your home, your family, and your stuff. And you think you've picked out all the features you want, but then you see all the different form factors that are available to you. And you're like, what the heck? Which one do I choose? Well, that's the question that I hope to help you answer today. Let's get to it. What up, everybody? George Langabeer here. Home security cameras. So many different options to pick from. We've got features, we've got form factor. Now, as far as features go, I did a buyer's guide video a couple months ago. You want to check that out, but I talk about all the different considerations as far as features and how to pick the right camera for you. Now, when we're talking form factor, I don't think many people cover that topic. So I'm going to cover it today because when people call me, I get a lot of questions about which different style of camera is right for me. Now we've got domes, we've got turret domes, we've got bullets, we've got pan tilt zoom cameras, we've got just pan tilt cameras, and we have varifocal cameras. Today I'm going to cover each one, talk about pros and cons for each one, and hopefully that will help you decide which one's right for you. Before we talk about each form factor, let's talk about some questions you should ask yourself. Are you buying these cameras to be part of a Wi-Fi security camera system or a wired NVR security camera system? So Wi-Fi versus wired. Do you want indoor cameras, outdoor cameras? Do you want them to be stationary or movable? Do you want a cheap, budget-friendly option, or do you want professional grade, the good stuff? Is this going to be a single camera, or is it going to be a full-blown camera system? Those are some questions to ask yourself before you pick your form factor. FYI, before we move on, with all these different form factors, you've got entry-level, basic budget options, you've got kind of in the middle, and you've got professional grade, which is the good stuff. Some of these pros and cons are going to depend on the quality of the camera, so keep that in mind. But with all these different form factors, I can tell you 100% you get what you pay for. All right, first up, we have the most basic of the bunch, which is a dome camera. Dome because of this shape. Now we've got this surface here that the camera's looking through. Sometimes it's glass, sometimes it's hard plastic, sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's tinted. You'd want it tinted if you don't want anybody looking at where your lens is looking, because with a dome, you can see that. Then you've got your base. Now, cons for this particular camera is number one, they don't usually do so well on the wall. They're usually meant to be mounted like this, not like this. That's because they're not as adjustable. So be careful with that. If you want to put something on the wall, you might want a different option. My other problem with this is right around here, no matter how sealed this is, you always seem to get moisture in here. And then this will fog up, just like your window on your car, and that's going to be a problem. Then basically your camera is useless. So that's my biggest problem with the dome camera. Now inside, the dome cameras are great. You're just putting on the ceiling or whatever, that's wonderful. So just consider the moisture and consider the fact you probably don't want to put this on the wall. All right, next up, we have a variation of the dome camera called a turret dome. Again, you've got that dome shape. Now this one's got this turret style. And what does that mean? It means this camera is very adjustable. You know, I said the dome wasn't good on a wall. Well, this one's great no matter which way you go, because you can loosen the security screw. This is from ALIBI Security. This is my favorite turret dome. If you're going to buy a camera from me, this is the one you'd buy. But you loosen the security screw and you can move this any way you want and adjust it any way you want. Now, this is a stationary camera. It's not meant to be movable, so keep that in mind, just like the dome camera. But it's a great camera. A thief would really have to work at it to put a dent in this thing. Now, that's where you get what you pay for. You buy a cheap option of the turret dome, and of course they can destroy it. But you get the professional grade stuff like this. This is a hardcore camera right here. Be very hard to destroy. This is also the most vandal-proof, weatherproof camera you can buy. There's just a lot of advantages to the turret dome. All right, next up we have what's called a bullet camera. Now, as a young camera installer, the reason I remember that is because I always thought this looked like a gun. Right now it's straight, but when you mount it, it's at a 90-degree angle and it kind of looks like a gun, hence being called a bullet. At least that's how I remember it. Now, this is the exact same camera as the turret dome I just showed you, just in the bullet form factor. Now, a lot of different brands will do that. They'll offer a dome or a turret dome and the bullet, and it's the same lens, same features, same everything, just a style preference. Now, me personally, I like the turret dome more for a couple different reasons, and I find that most of my customers agree. Number one is adjustability. This can go on a ceiling and it can go on a wall, just like the turret dome, but it's not as easy to fine tune. There's a few different screws here for pivot points, and you have to adjust them just perfectly. But especially when you're on a ladder, to really mess with those screws and get the camera just like you want it, it's kind of a pain in the butt. The other thing I don't like about this is it's a little more vandal prone, because if somebody hit this with a bat, they could break it off this arm and it would just fall to the ground. Whereas a turret dome, you'd have to hit it with a bat pretty freaking hard to even damage it at all, let alone have it fall to the ground. This one could just fall to the ground. The other thing to consider here is because it's a longer form factor, it might be better for objects far away just because you're getting closer to the object, but it's not as good for things close up. Like if you just got a camera in your yard and you want more bang for your buck and you're trying to get as much real estate as you can, the turret dome is a little more recessed. So even though it's a few more inches, it's going to get you more real estate. And so that's the other thing I don't like about this, because yeah, it's great to get an object far away, but when you've got them on your house, you want that bang for your buck. All right, then we have what's called a PTZ, pan tilt zoom camera, meaning that it pans and it tilts and it zooms. All the options that we've talked about so far are stationary, meaning they just look at one thing. When people call me, they think this is what they want, and I'm going to tell you right now, I talk them out of it. And there's a couple different reasons why. Now, back in the day, I was a loss prevention manager at a local retailer, meaning that I was sitting in an office watching for shoplifters using surveillance cameras, using PTZs. I was zooming in and out. I was following them around the store. I was zooming in to see what they had in their hands. When they put something in their pocket, I was zooming in. I was zooming in on their cars out in the parking lot to see their license plates for the police. I was using these all the time, and they were priceless to me. But as a homeowner, you're not doing that. You're not sitting there watching that camera all the time. So you can miss stuff. These are meant to be in a pattern when you're not using them, meaning they're just kind of circling around. Well, what happens if something's over there and the camera's looking over there and you missed it? Then you're pissed. These are usually more expensive, and then you just wasted money on a more expensive camera for something that you could have got on a stationary camera, but you missed it because you only had one pan tilt zoom. Now, if you're only going to do one camera on your house, this is a good way to go because you're getting more bang for your buck. It can see more area. But if you're getting a full-blown camera system on your house, don't get these. The other problem is these have auto tracking, which people think are so cool, meaning that it'll fixate on a person and follow that person. What happens if you have multiple thieves in your yard? It's going to follow one of them, but not all of them. And what if it follows the wrong one? What if one of them is just the decoy and the other ones are actually doing the deed and it misses it? Whereas if you had stationary cameras looking at everybody, then you got it. So these are usually for more commercial grade. Now, Wi-Fi cameras in particular are bringing out these PTZs all the time and getting more and more prevalent. But I'm telling you, it's really only if you're just going to do one camera. If you're doing multiple cameras, go stationary, not this. All right, next up we have a PT camera, which is just pan and tilt without the zoom. What does that mean? It means on the pan tilt zooms, they usually have an optical zoom, meaning that when you're zooming in, like in the case of me and my loss prevention job, if I was zooming in on a PTZ on a shoplifter outside and I was looking at their license plate, I could zoom in and it maintained its clarity. With these pan tilt cameras, you can digitally zoom, which you can pinch and zoom, but the more zoom you do, the more pixelated they get, so they're not as clear. So that's the main difference. Now, these are very prevalent right now, but they're great for indoor cameras when you just want to put it somewhere and you want to monitor an entire room. Great for kids, babysitters, and pets, where you just need to check in on something, but you're not worried about it for security. Now, you can use these pan tilt cameras outside, and they're great if you just have one camera and you want more bang for your buck out of just one. But again, it's always better to have more stationary cameras because you're going to know exactly what you're looking at, and this thing's not going to be stuck in a pattern somewhere. And they also have the auto tracking where they'll follow a person. You'll see this camera moving while I'm talking about it. And again, that can be a problem if you have multiple people you're worried about and it's following the wrong person. So just think about that. But pan tilt is the pan and the tilt without the zoom. And again, mostly in Wi-Fi cameras, and you're seeing more and more of these all the time. All right, last but not least, we have what's called a varifocal camera, or a variable focused lens. Now, I don't have an example to show you right here in person, but I'll show you some footage here and some pictures. A varifocal camera is a variation of a pan tilt zoom camera and a pan tilt camera, except it's the flip of the pan tilt. It's just the zoom without the pan tilt. Now, the domes, the turret domes, and the bullets we talked about, they're stationary. They can zoom with a digital zoom, but the more you zoom, the more pixelated they get. A varifocal camera is meant to zoom in on something, stay zoomed in, but it maintains its clarity. So for example, if you have a 4K camera and it's a dome, a turret dome, or a bullet, the more you zoom in, the more pixelated it gets at 4K, even at 4K. But with a varifocal, if you're zooming in at 4K and you leave it zoomed in on something, it maintains its 4K clarity. So for example, we had a guy that had an outbuilding 300 feet from his house. He couldn't get cable out to it to run cameras. So we put a camera on his house and aimed it at that building. But with a varifocal camera, we were able to make that building look much closer. It looked like it was in his backyard instead of 300 feet away. And it made him feel much more comfortable because he could see it like it was just right out back. So that was one example. Another example are people that have a big piece of property and they have long driveways and they're worried about shooting down their driveway, but they can't get a cable out there because there's no power, whatever the reason may be. You can shoot the driveway with a varifocal camera and zoom it in further down the driveway and it'll maintain its clarity. So if it's a 4K varifocal and you go down the driveway a little bit, maybe you can get a license plate because it maintains its clarity. So again, it doesn't move, it's stationary just like the dome, the turret dome, and the bullet, but it does have a zoom, much like the optical zoom of a PTZ where it maintains its clarity. So it does have some advantages. Now the varifocal can be in dome style or bullet style. They look the same as the other models that we talked about. They've just got that zoom. Now I just want to say real quick, with the Wi-Fi cameras in particular, there's getting to be some variations of what we talked about. So some miscellaneous types of styles. So you'll have pan tilt cameras that look like this. Now this still has a dome in it, but it's just a different form factor. Or you'll have bullet cameras that look like this, much smaller, but it's still got that bullet style. It almost looks, like a gun. And then brands like Akara have these little indoor cameras. I mean, I don't even know what to call this. It's not a dome, it's not a turret. So just keep in mind, there are some miscellaneous styles out there, but the basics we talked about have been the basics for a long time. Now, you may be asking which one is my favorite, and I kind of alluded to this while we were going through it, but it's the turret dome. I like the stationary cameras, in particular with home security. I like how vandal-proof this is. They're usually the most weatherproof because they're really sealed. You don't have the moisture problem. They've just got a lot of advantages to them. They're the most flexible as far as adjusting the shot. I love the turret dome, in particular, this one right here. Check out the video I did on this camera. All right, to sum up, keep those considerations in mind and ask yourself those questions. Is this going to be a Wi-Fi system or a wired NVR system? Are these going indoor or are they going outdoor? Do you want them stationary or do you want them movable? Are you low budget and you want an entry level, or do you want the good stuff and go professional grade? I'm telling you, with everything we talked about here, you get what you pay for. Now the budget options are great indoors when you're just worried about kids or pets or something like that, and it's not for your general security. Then go with a budget option, get yourself one pan tilt camera that can cover an entire room. That's great. But when you're outdoors, I would say follow my advice. Go stationary, go professional grade, get yourself the good stuff. Home security is an investment. You wouldn't go cheap on siding and windows. Why would you go cheap on cameras? Get yourself something that's going to last. Make sure it's vandal-proof. Make sure it's weatherproof. These are important considerations because it definitely is an investment. All right, there we go. Those are the basic form factors when it comes to home security cameras. What do you think? Do you have any of these styles? What's your favorite? If you've been looking for a camera, which ones have you been looking at? Let me know all the above in the comments. I appreciate your support. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. I love having you here. Until the next video, peace and love, my friends.